Welcome to Pemberley Farm. Well, today we're making same-day sourdough bread. Now we have one other sourdough video up, and it's making sourdough crackers, which is really simple and really yummy. Also feeding our starter. But this is our starter, our sourdough starter, and it's happy. I don't know, let's see. It's all bubbly. Can you see in there? It's all bubbly. I fed it day before yesterday. I keep it in the refrigerator when it's not in use. I'm not going to feed it every day because I don't need bread every day. So anyway, so this recipe is same-day sourdough bread. I can't remember where I found the recipe, but it's a good recipe, and it just calls for lukewarm water, active starter, olive oil, salt, and flour. I mean, that's an easy recipe. And it takes from 4 to 8 hours to make it, depending on how, for it to rise, depending on how hot or cold your house is. And so what we're going to do, I'll tell you before I even get started that I am using, I'm doing one loaf, but I'm using 2 of my Norpro pans, and I'll have a link for those in the description below, which I love. You can tell they're well used. I probably used them for 35 years or more, these 2 pans. But the way I eat, I don't eat a lot of bread, and so a small little piece of bread satisfies my hunger for bread, and it's not so bad. And I'm using also, I'm almost out, I'm using some whole wheat bread flour that from Azure Standard. I'm probably not going to have enough, so I've got some unbleached organic, it's both organic flour, also from Azure. So anyway, it's just really simple, and you put it, there is no rise in the bowl. Usually your bread excuse me. Usually the bread rises in the bowl, and then it rises again in the pan. That won't happen here. You just put it in the pan and it rises in the pan. Now, because my house is fairly cool, I just put it in my oven with the light on, and that helps. And so understand, it won't be the huge big fluffy loaf like normally I bake. I bake those for other people, I bake those for my husband, but for myself, I bake the smaller loaves so that I have the bread that I want, but I don't have it in such a large quantity. And yes, I could cut a big loaf in half, but hey, once you get started on the toast, you know what I'm saying. So anyway, so all we need is 1 cup, and I will say that, you know, most sourdough starter bread recipes, or at least most of the ones I've looked at, call for just half a cup of starter. But this calls for a whole cup of starter. So we're going to use a whole cup of starter. I love the way it smells. Ours does not get too very strong, because we pour the hooch off of it. If there's a, you know, if you don't, let me get some paper towel. If you don't feed it, you know, every other day or 2 or 3 days, it tends to get a little bit of hooch on it. If you wait a week or more, it will get hooch on it for sure. So now I'm not gonna put this down the drain, okay? You shouldn't do that. That's why I wipe everything off, and I'll finish wiping it off before I wash that. So anyway, I'm going to get the starter out of the way. Now I realize my starter container looks really bad. When I feed it, I'll feed it in a little bit, and when I feed it, then I'll pour it up into and get it stirred up real good. Then I'll pour it up into a clean one. I just, ever so often, you know, every week or so, maybe sometimes, it just depends, it may be a little longer, I'll get a new container, and that's clean. So I'm just going to put it over to the side, and into our, get that out of the way so it doesn't get wet and go down the drain. Alright, so into our starter we're going to add the water and the oil and the salt. So it calls for 1/4 cup of oil, letting the water get hot. It's pretty chilly outside, and it takes the water. It's lukewarm water, not hot water. So that's what you would use. And then salt is 1½ teaspoons. And I'm using Redmons real salt, which will also link below. I test it out like I would a baby. Like I would a baby. I'll pour a little bit out and put some cold in. It's a little warm. You don't want to kill the yeast, so to speak, in your starter. It's the same with just if you were making yeast bread. You don't want to kill the yeast. So if you get your water too hot, or whatever your liquid is, if you get it too hot, then you're going to kill the yeast. And so there's a fine line there, but it's not so fine that it's hard to deal with, okay? All right, so we're going to put in our water. All right, so we've got, in a bowl, we've added our water, our sourdough starter, our oil, and our salt. Now, this calls for 3 to 4 cups of flour, and you're just going to, always on bread, not just this bread, but all bread. If you excuse me a second, I think I'm going to get my hair pulled back so that I don't end up getting it in the bread. We don't want to do that. I mean, you know, I've had long hair a long time, and it sheds, and my family's about used to it, but still, you don't want bread in your hair in your bread. All right, so I've mixed that up. Now, I was saying that in all bread, say if it calls for, 3 to 4 cups, you start out with 3. If it calls 4 to 5 cups, you start out with 4. Because depending on where you are and how much humidity's in your house and how fresh the flour is and how soft, so to speak, the flour is, there's a lot of things that determines. And so you don't want to get too much flour in and it be a really not nice loaf. So we start out with at least 1 cup less than what it calls for. So here we go with our 1 of our wheat flour. Two. We're going to have enough of this, so that's good. 3. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pour up the 4th one. And I'll use, well, there was more in there than I thought. Okay. And I will use that 4th one when I start to knead the bread to flour my hands. So right now, all I'm doing, I didn't think I should have done this in a clear bowl, but all I'm doing is stirring it around. You can use I use a wooden spoon or a dough hook, and my dough hook is elsewhere right this minute, and I didn't want to go get it, and so I'm using a wooden spoon. That's what I always use. For years, even in my yeast bread, I use a wooden spoon, a heavy-duty wooden spoon. Something happened to my original one that I'd used for a long time. We had a class, and I think somebody liked it and took it home with them. So this is a long time ago. But anyway, so you just mix it together pretty good until it gets too difficult to do with the spoon. I'm going to add a little bit of flour. I think my countertop is clean. I've cleaned my countertop real good, and so I think what I'm going to do is just put this out on the countertop so you can see. Just put some flour out on the countertop so you can see what I'm doing. Like I said, I didn't think about doing it in a clear bowl today. do this. You could do it in a bowl. And if you've got a flatter bottom bowl would probably be good. I usually make a lot of loaves at one time, and so I use a great big bowl and it has a flatter bottom. So anyway, but I'm just incorporating more flour into it. This was kind of wet. And so you need it, once you get it all incorporated good, you need it for 6 to 8 minutes. That's according to the recipe, about 6 to 8 minutes. So I'll look at the clock and see what we're doing. Now, never ever, whether it's sourdough or not, don't ever do it like this. Keep your fingers together. That way you don't have as big a mess on your hands. There's no need in squeezing it. You know, there's just no need to squeeze it. So, that's what we're doing. And so now it's all incorporated. And I'll just keep throwing a little bit of flour under there so it doesn't stick. It's not sticking to my hands. That's good. You know, it's really, it feels like a good dough. If you've made, once you make bread enough, you can tell by the feel of the dough if it's going to be a really good loaf of bread. You just can. And I've been making bread for a long time. So, you know, you get used to it. And sometimes you fail. I mean, it happens. I've been making bread for probably close to 50 years. And I sometimes have a failure. So it's okay if you fail. When you first start out, if you have something that just didn't come out right, it didn't rise like you thought it should. I mean, make breadcrumbs out of it. You know, toast it, put it in the blender and make breadcrumbs out of it. Don't throw it away. Just use it. It can be used. There's different things you can do to use it. So anyway, we're gonna pause right now, and because you don't want to watch me knead for 6 to 8 minutes. Okay, our dough, we've done it for about 7 minutes, give or take, and it's a nice dough. Now, like I say, this is for one loaf, but I'm on purpose gonna make a small, short little loaf because of the way I eat. And so I'm going to just take, I also left my little cutter thing elsewhere. And so I'm going to divide it into 2 loaves. And now, you know, there are people who do all kind of fancy things to shape their bread. Not me. If y'all have watched very many of my videos, you know the simpler the better is my motto. We don't get elaborate here. We don't get fancy. Yes, I have made artisan bread before, but I mean, you know, we mostly have loaf bread. The artisan bread is pretty and it's all kind of neat, but loaf bread is our thing, and so that's what I do. Now, I can show you how to make artisan bread, but the loaf bread is what we use the most of, and what is reasonable for us. And so I'm just making my little loaves. Well, one's a bit bigger than the other, but it's okay. I'm the only one that eats this. So I'm going to put it in the pan. I've already sprayed the pan. So I'm putting them in the pans. And then I'm going to put them in the oven. And then I'm going to cover them up. The light's been on. I turned the light on earlier so that it could get kind of warm in there already. Then I'm going to take the towel and just cover them up and let them stay there for quite a few hours. Now, normally, you know, it takes at least 4 hours. It has taken longer, but usually it's around 4 hours. And when it rises, when it gets to the top of the pan and maybe a little above it, then I'll pull them out and I'll preheat the oven, and then when it comes up to temperature, I will put them back in. Now I can't remember, let's see what it is. Oh, 350. It says 350 for 40 minutes. Now, I do it higher for less minutes, and the bread comes out pretty well. I do it a little bit higher for a little bit less minutes. But you do your oven. This oven runs a little bit cold, I'm used to doing most of mine in a bigger gas oven, which seems to run hotter. And I know you out think, well, 350 is 350. But if you do very much cooking and you've had more than one oven, you know that sometimes some ovens just run a little colder on the same temperature than others. So anyway, 350 for 40 minutes is what it says. So we'll see. We'll see when it's time to do it. So you can see that I used about half the flour out of that, and just using it, and there's still some on the countertop. So anyway, that's why it didn't need to be any drier, see. So I could, if I'd have added this whole 4th cup, it would have been awful. It would have been an awful loaf. Okay, I'm about to take these out of the oven. They're not cooked. They're just, they've risen probably about as much as they're going to, because remember now, this is actually the recipe for just one loaf, and I'm making 2 small loaves out of it. So I'm going to take it out and turn the oven on, preheat it, and then we'll come back when we take them out of the oven. Okay, our bread is out of the oven, and remember now that I told you that I've done it. This is a 1 loaf recipe, and I made it 2 loaves on purpose so that I can have this little bit of bread without overdoing it with the eating plan that I'm on. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed our little video of making same day sourdough bread. Be sure to like our videos, share, and subscribe to our channel if you've not already, and check us out on Facebook. We are Pemberley Farm Homestead. God bless you from Pemberley Farm.